Some brand and company names that we've probably been mispronouncing for quite some time. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the focus group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Welcome to the focus group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host Tim Bennett. Check out TFG Unbuttoned, our Tuesday podcast, and everything about us, everything is at focusgroupradio.com. All our shows, all our media, the bios for me and Tim and I. And if you want to be grammar police, that's the one you're going to get us on, the me and I thing. The focus group drops on Wednesdays as a video on YouTube and on audio on Saturdays on Spotify, podcast, any podcast platform of choice. But lately we found that Spotify is huge, right, Tim?
Yeah. And we were number 14 last week on the of all marketing podcasts in the United States.
So if you're listening, you're smart. You're in the crowd. You're in the right crowd, right?
You know, the I thing and the me thing, when I was back in Connecticut at holiday time, I kept hearing on commercials, the local commercials, and they speak the way we do, so I have no problem with it. Lots of stuff were and I. There was no and me. It was and I. It must have been that's the way we were taught.
Well, yes, my mom tried to correct this the other day because she's a teacher. She was a teacher.
She did. She tried to correct you too, eh?
Yeah, and she goes, "Honey," she goes, and as we worked through it, she said to me, "I have a vague memory of you not getting this as a kid." So that was kind of fun. Hey,
she's still working. Poor Carol.
Exactly. She's still pushing the chalk on the chalkboard. I got a quick one for you. Do you remember about 2 weeks ago, caught my eye was a Pontiac Firebird Trans Am that was found in a barn somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
1979. It was only driven 37 miles. Well, it went to auction. Now, when we did the show a few weeks ago, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, and we talked about the car, based on previous models that were in such good condition, the thinking was that it was going to be about $70,000 at auction. Take a guess how much it went for. Now, bear in mind it only was driven 37 miles.
I'm going to say between 280 and 320.
You're not bad. 220,000.
220. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little lower than, but that's still a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's because of that mileage thing.
Yeah. I wonder who bought it.
I don't remember who, but they reiterated in the article that they were so lucky that all they had to do is dust the car off, clean it, and put fluids back in. Because you and I know how these hoses decay.
I was going to say, lucky it didn't dry rot all the rubber and everything.
The dry rot. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Wow. I'm not so sure. Well, if you're a collector and you love that sort of stuff, you'll buy it. But it's probably someone either adding to a collection or I wondered. A lot of the auto brands keep a model of each thing for their own museum.
Really?
Now, whether they show them or not. Yeah. Even at Subaru, we had early models or first models of something. They tried to get other things along the way if they would come up for sale, and they didn't have one for the collection at the company. They would try to buy one.
So here's a question for you: if there's a company collection, did they even bother with spare parts for each car?
Well, I think there's legally all cars that are produced have to have some level of crash. They call them crash parts or repair parts. And so if you built, if you built a small quantity, you still had to have, and there's some formula for it. You'll go through X amount of fenders, or you'll go through X amount of door latches, or whatever the math is. And the big problem with the auto industry was all what they call gray parts that would come from places like, at the time, Korea or particularly China was really bad with making or fake parts that
looked
like
knockoff?
they were real. Yeah,
okay.
Knockoff. So in a tenth of the price. So you'd say, I'm going to order my fender from China, which I did, by the way. I ordered a part for one of my cars, and it came. It didn't have the screw holes in it. It didn't have the things we're supposed to do. And so I fixed it, much to Richard and our friend Lisa's surprise that I was able to. It was a side light assembly that you put on the side for the directional for blinkers, and so I was able to do it, and they were shocked that I was able to.
Which car was this for?
It was for the All-Track.
Okay. Okay.
I went through the car wash and one of the directional things fell off.
Hey, speaking of the car wash, both our all-track, maybe you didn't have it. My all-track wagon, when we had it, had a sunroof, huge sunroof, right? And every time we would go to the car wash, and I used to have a bike rack on top, so every time we would go to the, you what?
Did you get wet?
No. But every time we went to the car wash, they would push a couple of buttons, and as the car moved through, it was one of those robotic things where your car is being dragged through. The brush that would go over the top of the car would just lift up and not touch the top of the car. And for years, I thought it was because we had the bike rack on there. Now that we have the Taos, we don't have a sunroof, which I don't actually miss because I like the light coming in, but I don't. It's like Tim used to always say that. You're like, it's nice, but
I don't like them.
Now the brush does the top of the car. And so when we pulled up to the car wash a few weeks ago, I said to the young guy, I said, hey, quick question for you. The brush that goes over the top, I said, you don't turn that off for the bike rack? No, we turn that off for sunroofs. You don't want one of those things shattering in the car wash.
I would have thought it would have been the bike rack because there's
Same
instances where those floppy things, the
fabric strips.
The fabric strips get caught and then yank the roof rack off, which is not a pleasant thing either. So that's funny. I never heard of it for the sunroof or moonroof. I've only heard it for racks, but that's interesting.
By the way, that's a business that the guy that owns the local Jiffy Lube upstate is a big VW fan. I mean, he's got an old Scirocco. He's got sometimes he parks the cars around the place, but he expanded his empire to include this big car wash thing. Every time I go by there's a line of cars, and it moves because it's like robotic. And I think to myself, they recycle the water, I guess, right?
A lot of them do,
You're buying the equipment, and you have to probably buy the solvents or the cleaners from someplace. But they have a great staff, super friendly, like high school kids, always really nice. And it's just like so one day I went and get the oil change, and I said, boy, this car wash thing. And he smiles and he just lowers his voice. He goes, I'm minting money.
Yeah. No, you would. If you're in a good location and a good place, there was one there where I lived in Pennsylvania, and there was always a line. And the average car wash is $14 or $15, $16, whatever it is. And they go through every 45 seconds, minute. Think about it. That's more than you would get at a little convenience store or something. So it's a good business.
And then when you pull out, they have rows of nice places to park and vacuum your car as long as you pump the quarters. So I said, Bob, this is something we should have gotten into. Also, another moneymaker is the storage spaces.
Yes.
Our neighbor up, behind us, he owns 4 facilities now. Started with one.
Oh my
He buys land, sits on it for a while, develops it, puts these things up. He said it's a whole system. At least 40% of the units rented usually have to go to auction at some point. So all you're really doing is sending out collection letters, threatening letters, and then it goes to auction. Then you clear it out, and someone else comes in and rents it, and the process starts over again. It's
like putting something in the freezer. Most of the time, that's one step to the garbage, right? You put something in the freezer, and then it's going to go, how old is this? I don't even know what it is. Throw it away.
Yeah, this just literally happened. I opened the freezer upstate, and there was a thing of butternut squash soup or something. And I look at Bob, and I said, how long has this been in here? He goes, since Thanksgiving, but it's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Really?
Yeah, that's okay. It's something that's been in there for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, okay.
You don't want. But yeah, no, Thanksgiving, that's okay. 6 months is about 6 months, or 8 months.
Yeah, so that's pushing it. The Tim freezer etiquette. Okay, listeners, the way the show works is we do what we just did. We have a little banter and catch up, and then we do a segment called Caught Your Eye, where we both bring something that caught our eye to the table, followed by our visit with our friends at Deep Discount, which we are going to be having some fun with this week. Take a quick break, then we do Business Birthday, and then as I teased at the top of the show, found an article about a lot of company and brand names with their phonetic spellings. Apparently, many people have been saying things wrong. I was actually surprised. Did you read the list, Tim?
Yeah, some of them I did not recognize, but there was one that I was surprised with, and I'm wondering if it's the same one you were. So
you were okay. So they tell you how to, and I was pleased to say that I was pronouncing most of the names correctly, but we'll see how that goes. So without further ado, Mr. Bennett.
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
Well, John, your friend and mine, King Charles III. Now, I didn't know he was the third. Did you?
Neither did I. I just know King Charles.
I thought it was just King Charles. But apparently people in Australia don't think, he's a nice man, but not sure he's up for the job. Is what says the Queen's finished, and I don't think Charles is up to it, said Robin Welsh in Australia. So the country of Australia has decided to drop the UK monarch from its cash. So Australia, which is a British part of the British monarchy, has the Queen as head of state. They said they're going to replace the last of its banknotes featuring the late Queen with something much closer to home. They said Britain's King Charles, the late Queen's son, and successor, may have inherited the throne, but his face will not appear on Australia's $5 bills or any of their paper money. Most people are positive about it, said they think it's brilliant. Instead of the king, the Australian government has decided that the bills will carry images honoring the country's indigenous culture. And particularly the first one would be the $5 note, which they said will have heritage and images of things closer to home as they see it. So they said that people then wondered about what was going to happen with some of the other former British colonies or part of the monarchy. So there is a kind of a groundswell in Australia for a while now that they want to be a republic and they want to leave the monarchy. And so there may be a vote on that. But as of now, the Queen Elizabeth II's face is on more than a dozen currencies in circulation around the world. The UK, for instance, will start rolling out new banknotes bearing King Charles's image next year. But in light of Australia's move, they've been trying to gauge what other countries are going to do. So Canada, for instance, has no plans to replace the Queen. Canada has developed a new bill. I haven't seen it yet. It's a 20, but it's plastic-based.
Is that to thwart, counterfeiting?
That, but more so for longevity. Paper bills don't last long. So this polymer-based or plastic-based 20, they said will be around forever, and they have no, and it has the Queen's picture on them, and they have no desire to take those out of circulation right now. But they said the decision would be up to the Prime Minister right now, Justin Trudeau, and his finance minister as to whether they want to put King Charles on any of the bills. They said no, that's not going to happen. Australia did say, back to Australia for a second, that Charles will go on some of the coins, some of the metal coins. And then they talked to New Zealand. And New Zealand hasn't put much thought into it either. And they said they had no plans. They have no plans to put King Charles in the banknotes. Maybe when they redesign their money, maybe when they redesign the 20 note and some coins. But that's a long way off, according to New Zealand's finance minister. So Charles will not. So the Queen will be with us for a while, John.
I suspect that a lot of things are going to just be different after her reign because of the longevity of it. I mean, she crossed multiple decades, and she literally went from one century to the next, right? So, yeah, and her relationship to the British people because of that, World War II, everything that transpired is just going to be different. But I think Charles is doing a good job so far. I
haven't heard much.
Well, he's doing the royal stuff with Camilla, and I think all the other royals are. I read this morning that supposedly Charles and William are planning how to have Kate and Harry at the coronation and how to corral or contain.
You mean Harry and Meghan?
I'm sorry, Harry and Meghan. Yeah, which I'm like so out of interest with that drama at this point. I don't know if you are, but it's like,
yeah, I don't understand the thing about corralling them. I thought they behaved themselves at the funeral, of course, and for some other events that they had gone to in the UK. I don't think they're that gauche or out of control. They did say our friend Carl, who's an Anglophile, probably like your Bob. He told me that Parliament, somebody has in Parliament, and the UK Parliament has put forward the idea of stripping Harry and Meghan of any of the royal titles.
I've heard that, yeah.
But who knows? I don't know.
I don't know I don't know what the title does to them except when they're like going to a charity event. Oh, it's the Prince Harry. Okay.
I think I think they were horrible to give them that name, the Duchess of Sussex. Don't you think? Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Try to say Duchess of Sussex.
Duchess of Sussex, Duchess of Sussex. She sells seashells by the seashore.
Duchess
it's
of
one
Sussex.
Of those. Yeah.
Maybe that was a joke. Maybe they did that on purpose. Let's do Sussex. Duchess of Sussex. Not pretty.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit better than Cornwall.
Duchess of Cornwall, or Duchess of Kent, or Duchess of. I just think,
Kent would have been easy.
I think Duchess of Sussex doesn't sound good. Doesn't sound
I think
right.
you figured out what's going on there.
Yeah. So what caught your eye?
What caught my eye is laundry. And I came across an article, and it was the headline was, "How many times can you wear your clothes without washing them?" And this is one of these perennial things that I find kind of fascinating. I'm going to give you the top line summary. If it's close to your body, aka underwear, workout clothing, tights, and socks, it should be washed after one wearing. Everything else is sort of up for grabs, and it's based on how much time it spends in contact with your body or your genital area. They don't mention the back end, but you know. So, dress shirts. If you wear an undershirt, you don't have to wear it. We could wear it a couple of times. It turns out that re-wearing the same clothes, particularly on consecutive days, they claim is linked to avoiding decision fatigue. Hence, wearing the same clothes involves less decisions. So, this is the Steve Jobs model.
Right.
I think I'm going to wear New Balance sneakers, and I'm going to wear a black turtleneck, and I'm going to wear jeans every day. He had a closet with like 40 boxes of his favorite pair of New Balance, and he never varied. I admire it because it's like this one decision out the door, right?
Yeah, well, they said that was his uniform. He didn't have to make any decision. He knew what he was wearing every day. I like that idea.
Oh, totally.
I used to, so growing, when I was in college, because I had to do my own laundry as you did.
Same here.
I used to wash my jeans every time I wore them.
No, so there's a whole thing about jeans in here. So
Right.
socks, underwear, anything that comes in contact with your body is potentially holding on to bacteria, particularly gym clothes and stuff like that. So you should definitely do that. But the jean thing is totally out, meaning it's anybody's guess what you want to do. So the one guy said in here that whether and how often to wash jeans can be a hot topic. Well, we just hit it. Since many people want to maintain the integrity of the fabric, which is usually stiffer and more durable. If jeans aren't sweaty, dirty, or stained, they don't have to be washed often. And this guy, Rossi, said, I personally don't wash my jeans. And I know a lot of people who don't wash their jeans. And if they do, they wash them inside out and they air dry them. They never put them in the dryer.
I air dry mine, but they need to be washed.
Well, you know this not washing the jean thing. We had two guys that were from New Zealand that used to work with my former agency, Moon City. Super talented motion graphic artists. And one day, out of conversation over lunch, it turned out that they never washed their jeans, and everybody was appalled because we're all American. We're like, "Are you kidding?" And they're like, "No, this pair here, I've never washed it."
Do they smell like ass?
No. But it turns out that the one of them was wearing a pair that had this kind of almost like a waxy finish. It was an interesting denim, and he said if you can't wash this too often. So one day I go to remember Lucky Jeans. I went into the Lucky store one time and I was going to buy a bunch of pairs in this. I said, how often should these be washed? And the woman just said, she goes, well, it's up to you. She said, but I only wash my jeans once every 8 or 9 weeks, inside out, the whole bit. So, right?
So, I mean,
it depends on your lifestyle.
Right, and your jeans are touching you as much now. I hope they're wearing underwear, these New Zealand boys.
Well, if you do not wear underwear, they recommend you wash your jeans frequently.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
I wonder what Garrett, remember Boys in the Booth, Garrett didn't use soap.
Yeah,
remember
he
when
didn't believe soap. He thought that it did something or tricked the body.
Have you ever washed without soap? On purpose?
And if I've had to, it's because
there was no soap.
Yeah, it's oversight. The one thing they also talked about was pajamas. Now, did you wear pajamas when you were a kid?
Yep.
Yeah, we did too. And we wore them all week, and then they got washed.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's just fine because often, the other thing about all this is Americans are hygiene obsessed, apparently, and we are more prone to taking multiple showers a day and stuff like that. So all of this is sort of, based on your personal lifestyle choices and stuff. And then they talked about outerwear. Now, this was the total. Jackets and coats typically don't need to be washed more than once a month. But when was the last time you washed a coat?
Yeah, rarely. Maybe a jean jacket when I had it, but that was it.
Yeah, I that one, especially if it touches your skin. And then they brought up gym clothing. That came through a couple times. The gym gym.
You got to
stuff,
wear.
and
There were a lot of boys at the boathouse that didn't wash their gym clothes, and they stunk.
and
And they
B.
would hang them up and then put them on again. It was disgusting.
Are you talking about the singlets that they would wear
Oh,
on
yeah.
the boat?
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, they smelled horrible. We would hose them down.
I was taught really early with cycling the bibs, because you guys have sort of similar except for the padding, that you don't wear it twice because just the sweat the whole bit. But
It's nasty.
That's what it says here. It's like they said, if you're in a gym and your clothing is touching a mat or everything, you're bringing all this bacteria onto the clothing. So just wash it. So that's what.
Now, my grandmother was convinced that Sears was in cahoots with the clothing manufacturers, so they were all in cahoots together, because she felt that things like dryers, particularly a dryer, she believed you should hang your clothes out or let them dry in the house. Mm-hmm. That the dryer was eating the clothes, which meant you had to buy more clothes, which meant you had to support Sears more, or whoever you were buying your clothes from.
Do you think she's that far off?
So I remember my mom was trying to explain to her that they got her a dryer. And my mom says, here's how you clean the lint. And my grandmother holds the lint up. Says, look at this. It's eating the clothes.
She's right.
So she refused to use it.
I was just going to say, if you've ever cleaned the lint filter, you're like, what is this? It's the clothes.
Yeah. She said the appliance manufacturers were in cahoots with the clothing manufacturers. You were going to buy. It's going to make you buy more clothes.
My friend Chris, who teaches up at Williams, he's from France, and he's always been ultimately like, how come Americans dry everything all the time? And we're like, what do you mean? He has this elaborate folding drying rack. So when he does laundry, everything is on this rack for overnight. Maybe sheets and towels he does the dryer. He said, but in France, energy costs so much money that you don't willy-nilly run things through the dryer, right?
Yeah. I remember when Mary Ann had the Polish exchange students.
Ah, yes.
And it snowed,
yes.
and they had gone outside, and they came in, and Mrs. Candido had taken the clothes and put them in the dryer and then brought them up. And they kept touching them as being warm. They had never heard of a dryer, were fascinated by the whole thing. And they took them downstairs and showed them the dryer. Of course, that was when the iron wall was still up in the
I was going to say that
early
was
80s.
Early
1980,
80s.
1980, 1981. Yeah. So, well, we're Americans. We're consumer culture, Mr. Nash.
Uh-huh. All right, so as many of you know, Deep Discount is a partner of ours here on the Focus Group, and we would like you to shop at their site by going to ours, focusgroupradio.com. They've been a partner of ours for quite some time, and I'll just say that I've seen a whole bunch of articles pop up about packaged media, and one of them recently the title was, My Husband Was Right, and this woman's husband basically was like, look, if you don't buy or own the show, it may not be streaming someday, and a whole bunch of her shows vanished off a streaming platform.
Wow.
So I'm going to tell her, if I knew her, I'd say send her to Deep Discount. But so this week we have a sale, and the sale is Mr. and Mrs. Film and TV sale. I'm very pleased with Tim's pick, by the way. So without further ado, Mr. Bennett, what did you select?
Yeah, I picked, for a couple of reasons, but I picked The Talented Mr. Ripley, which stars Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jude Law, Cate Blanchett, Philip Seymour Hoffman. It's came out in 1999. You can get it at deep discount for under $10 on Blu-ray. And it's based on the I believe it's a 1950s novel, 1955 novel of the same name. And about a young man who is Matt Damon, who goes off to France or goes off to Italy to try to convince this wealthy man's son to come back to New York in the 50s. And then it turns into a bit of a, I don't know, would you say it's a psychological thriller?
I would say psychological thriller, yeah. And it's creepy. Matt Damon does a great job. I'm so pleased that you picked this because this was on Showtime about 2 months ago, briefly. And I have not seen it in years. And at $9.33 for the Blu-ray, so you're going to get a really great quality image. It's a good film. And, when all this stuff starts falling, like, it's just because he's the consummate liar.
Right.
That's what Matt Damon basically does. He keeps creating stories and fictions and how he weaves them together. And ultimately, it causes,
I'd gone to school with somebody like him, and people often reference this person's name and say, "Oh, he's just a talented Mr. Ripley." But so the movie received 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor for Lost. So yes, go to Deep Discount and
Well
pick
done
that
film.
up.
Super good pick there. The one I picked is a movie that I remember seeing only 2 or 3 times, and the two definitely in childhood. My mom made us watch it. It's Bette Davis in the movie Mr. Skeffington, and she stars opposite Claude Rains. And there's a whole great cast here as well. But so Fanny Skeffington, basically, she is like the beauty of the town. And she dreams of a picture-perfect life, but she's close to losing everything because her brother, Trippy, what a funny name, played by Richard Waring, he's in some kind of trouble. But if she, Bette Davis, who plays Fanny Skeffington, marries Job Skeffington, which is played by Claude Rains, she can make this problem go away. But they don't really love you. She doesn't love him, but he loves her. All this other stuff happens. And I remember distinctly the end of the movie because she starts losing her hair, I think from diphtheria. Like, remember, I had to look that one up. I'm like, when do we have that? He is blinded in war. He goes overseas, and I think it could be World War II, and it might have been a concentration camp or a POW camp. So she's all worried because then she starts having visions of him, and she wants him back in her life. And so he comes back, and her hair is falling out, but he's blind. It doesn't matter. And okay, love's great. So anyway, it's a great Bette Davis movie, and I just think it's perfect for this week. So it's Mr. Skeffington. And the new release this week is a movie I read about, and I do definitely want to see it because I'm going to read to you the description. It's spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. 2022 American romantic drama film starring Jim Parsons, who we know from The Big Bang Theory, and Ben Aldridge as 2 lovers, one who watches the other's final months before his death from terminal cancer. The film, based on the 2017 memoir, spoiler alert, The Hero Dies, by Michael Ausiello, is directed by Michael Showalter and written by David Marshall. When this came out, I definitely wanted to see it, and then it was like, you know how you do that? You like, I want to see it, and then Where is it at? Is it on a streamer? Can I rent it? Can I buy it? So here we have it at deep discount for $18.99 on DVD, and it got great reviews, so I'm definitely putting it on my list.
Spoiler. So head over to focusgroupradio.com, click on the Deep Discount logo. You'll be able to own your passion there, and you'll find all kinds of great items there, along with the current sale, which is a Mr. and Mrs. sale. I picked The Talented Mr. Ripley. John had picked Mr. Skeffington, which I know a lot of Bette Davis stuff and do not know this one, so I'm adding that to my list.
You and Matt. Matt needs to see this too.
Yeah. And the new release this week is Spoiler Alert, which is something that John and I have both heard of and are looking forward to view as well. So again, go to Deep Discount by going through our site, focusgroupradio.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got a business birthday as well as some corporate names that we may have been mispronouncing, corporate brand names. So stay tuned.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Welcome back to The Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett, who's untangling his long...
This damn cord.
on your headphones, right?
I know, it's crazy. I need to do the things like you have in your ears again.
I should teach you how to do this because I roll over. You and I have the same chair. We
keep rolling over the cord.
Chair. And that Aeron chair, the minute that wheel goes over it, it sticks, and then your head tilts to the side. Anyway, focusgroupradio.com is the URL for our website. Check it out. You can learn about us there, as well as our Tuesday podcast, TFG Unbuttoned, 20 minutes, 3 stories. And this show, Focus Group, drops in video form on Wednesdays, and audio is via your podcast platform of choice on Saturdays. So without further ado, are you untangled?
Yeah, I'm untangled finally.
Ish.
Enough. I'm untangled enough, I guess.
To get through the rest of the show. All right, without further ado.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
So every once in a while, John and I have been doing business birthdays here for 15 years. So
Yes.
every once in a while,
15-year broadcast history, right?
right, as of March, I believe it's March 8th, I think
Yes, correct.
would be the official date. But since, and we try not to repeat birthdays, and so this particular day, February 8th, there was no real business birthday that I could find. So I poked around. I use a Canadian site. I also use an Indian site. And I use a few other sites to try to find people. And so I thought, since it's February and it's Black History Month, I would go. So I found a site that had profiled prominent African Americans, and this name had came up, Rebecca Lee Crumpler. And while not a business per se, she was a physician, which, as we know, now is a business, right, John?
Well,
So-
and you say here she's a medical author. That's business.
Right. Yeah. So Rebecca Lee Crumpler, born February 8th, 1831. She died March 9th at 64 years old, 1895. She was the first African-American female physician, and also one of the very first African-American authors, particularly for medical books. So she was a nurse, and they said she was a nurse and she was an author. She studied at the New England Female Medical College and became the first African-American woman to become a doctor of medicine in the United States. They said when she graduated, there were very few African Americans that were even allowed to attend medical college or publish books. She first practiced in Boston, and then she had gone down after the Civil War in 1865 to Richmond, Virginia, thinking she'd be able to treat women and children and perform some missionary work. And so she had joined something called the Freedmen's Bureau, which did medical care for freed slaves. They said, however, she was the subject of intense racism and sexism, that many people believed that a man's brain was 10% bigger than a woman's brain on average, and that a woman's job was to act submissively and be beautiful. So aside from the fact that she was black or a person of color, she also first experienced sexism and then, of course, intense racism. They said many of the male physicians did not respect her, and they would not approve her prescriptions. So the men had these doctors or physicians had to approve her prescriptions for patients, and they didn't want to listen to her medical opinions either. So she headed back north. She went back to Boston, and so they said that she was given the opportunity. She was recommended to go to medical school by her doctor because there was a huge demand after the Civil War for people to study medicine, and because there just weren't people. Because of the huge losses on both sides that from the war. They said when she went and graduated school, there were only 300 women in med school at the time, yet there were 54,000 plus male physicians in the U.S. So she was one of 300 women and the first African-American woman to graduate. So they said when she graduated, they didn't really want to recognize her by name, so they wanted to call her Mrs. after her husband's name. But she finally got through with Mrs. Rebecca Crumpler, so she was able to graduate. And from there, she said she got into wanting to help people because where she grew up in Pennsylvania, she was born in Delaware, grew up in Pennsylvania, and her aunt had raised her, and her aunt was known in town as the kind of the physician or the nurse. She helped everybody. Everybody came to her house, even though she was not classically or traditionally trained, her aunt in medicine. She was the place everybody went in town when they needed help. So she liked the idea of helping people. So that's why she decided to go into medicine. They said she never worried about getting paid. She said so she focused on women and children under 5 years of age, and she never really worried about getting paid because she just knew most people didn't have the money to do it. So in order for her to keep some of her what she thought were her best medical advice from what she learned, she had written a book, and it was called A Book of Medical Discourses. And she had two recommendations in there. She recommended that women should study the mechanisms of human structure before becoming nurses in order to better enable themselves to protect life. She said that many people don't understand about protecting life and that there's some homeopathic things you can do rather than just medicine. And then she also, secondly, she said it was a little bit of autobiographical as well when she talked about medicine. She talked about how you should live a good life, and it contained advice, for instance, on a happy marriage. John, pay attention. She said, the secret to a successful marriage is to continue in the careful routine of the courting days till it becomes well understood between the two. So they said at the time, most books written by African Americans then had to have introductions written in the style of white male authors to give them authentication. But she was able to persevere and did it on her own and wrote the own text herself and got the book published. And they said at the time she was one of the very first authors of African American authors to do a medical guide or medical book. She died, and kind of sadly, she died in Boston. She and her husband remained in an unmarked grave.
Jeez.
So finally, due to donations and people studying her and finding out about her and learning about the fact of her history and her kind of iconic or legend, she and her husband and finally received a granite tombstone 125 years later in 2020.
2020?
Yes, this is in Fairview, Massachusetts. They said they were buried in unmarked graves for 125 years until July 16th, 2020, when Rebecca and her husband, Arthur, received a granite headstone based on getting donations. And so now the gravestone markers are there. There's the very first medical society for African American women is named after her, which is called the Rebecca Lee Society. Virginia's governor declared March 30th Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler Day in 2019. And Syracuse University has a health club named the Rebecca Lee Pre-Health Society, which encourages people from diverse backgrounds to pursue careers in public health. So that's our birthday for. I knew nothing about her and would not have known about her. She didn't show up anywhere other than when I went to this African American history site. She wasn't in any of the other sites.
There's so much in the bio you were reading that, and it's not about her. Like there's a lot that you can infer about her character based on what she dealt with, right?
Yeah, a woman. And let's start with being a woman, right? Right. And
being black in
America.
Deciding that your talents are best used down south.
Yep.
Where we just had the Civil War, because we all know about that. Then realizing, and then, the pushback and the whole bit, and she moves back to Boston, and then to publish something, and then to have some white guy, a doctor, write an intro for you, and then ending up in unmarked graves. I mean, her contribution to her community and to other people is remarkable. And
her husband was a slave. And
really?
he got away. He freed he actually got away. He did some sort of. There was a whole long side story about her husband, and he ended up escaping to Canada. And he went to New Brunswick. He went to New Brunswick, Canada, and then they met in Boston, and that's when they got married. But it says she married Arthur Crumpler from St. John, New Brunswick. He was formerly enslaved, and he escaped bondage in Southampton, Virginia. And there was some sort of they were wrestling, and there was some wrestling match or something going on where he was, and he was able to get out and made it to Canada. So, I mean, just think about all the adversity that these folks had, right? And she persevered. So,
and, leapfrogging off her birthday, which is, I think if you could do this for all of February, that would be fantastic. Now we have a state in our union who doesn't want to teach African history. Like I 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? Or 2 steps forward, 1 giant step back. I can't figure out which it is. But, this is, you highlight someone like her, and it just really puts into stark relief where we are at and how we value others, and it's just so cool. I mean, that's bad, but she's cool.
So I will look for others. I mean, there's some great. I bookmarked the site, so it'll be a good go-to for me to try to find birthdays that are pertinent throughout the year. So
throughout the correct. So as I teased at the beginning of the podcast today, apparently a lot of us are saying company names incorrectly, brand and company names, and I found this article on CNBC. I thought it was kind of a fun thing to just go through for me and Tim and I, all the way back to that whole thing again.
Tim and I.
Tim and me, I think is the correct one. And it starts off with a well-known athletic shoe and athletic apparel brand, and the phonetics. So I'll just kick off the first one. Adidas. Is that how you would? Is that the? Because the way they did it, they said they did ADDY-DASS.
Yeah, Adidas is the correct.
Adidas. Okay.
Yeah, and I always said Adidas.
Adidas. Yeah, same here.
And there was a kid in college, Paul Harris from West Virginia, that would say Adidas, and we all just thought
And
he was
had
some,
it right?
Well, we thought he was just some hick from West Virginia. And of course, he's a big attorney now. But he's like, it's Adidas. We're like, no, it's not. It's Adidas. So no, you're right. It's Adidas.
Adidas.
Now, you forgot the one in front of it. I thought you were going to do that one first. The car brand. Did you?
That's
get that?
further down.
Oh, it is further. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see it further down.
I'm just doing it. That was the thing that the picture that kicked off the article was. I'll save that. So Tim, what was the next one?
So the next one, I was not familiar with this.
Oh, I am. Yeah.
So is it Allianz?
Allianz.
What is that?
Allianz is a. I thought it was a financial services company or software, but
yeah, I was not familiar with that one. That was one I was not familiar with. And I was trying to look at it. So it's Allianz, and it's Allianz, right?
Allianz. I think that's pretty close to the way it's spelled. That one,
Yeah.
I thought. This next one, BVLGARI, Bulgari. And we all know Bulgari, right?
Yeah, listen. They had a lot of those great. That hotel we stayed in Oklahoma City had Bulgari.
Yes,
remember I told you to take them.
I remember at breakfast you're like, did you take the little stuff? I was like, what should I? Oh yeah, it's Bulgari.
It was probably $50 worth of little toiletries in the hotel.
It was a great hotel.
I forget the name of that hotel. It was like
It was
a ripoff of
fantastic.
another name.
It was, and it was an old office building that had been converted. I remember arriving after that long day. It was not a bad day. It was just long and hot, and it was such a beautiful hotel.
Yeah. This other one I don't know either. It's a German food company, and named after its founder. It's Dr. Oetker, Oetker. I guess if you know German, you know how to say it.
I would not have known that by the
I
spelling.
wouldn't either.
How would you have said that? How would you have said that had you not seen the phonetics?
Oetker?
Oetker, yeah. That's what I did last night when I was looking at this. I was like, Dr. Oetker. All right. Oh, you gave me this hard Swedish one.
You can skip it.
Fjällräven. And it's spelt like FJA with the 2 dots over it, LLRA 2 dots over it, VEN.
Fjällräven. It's an Arctic fox in Swedish, John.
Yeah.
Don't you know Swedish?
Yeah. Very little of it, except for the meatball order at IKEA.
All right. This next one, Givenchy, as people would say, probably Givenchy. It's Givenchy, which I've always used to say it that way, only because I think maybe Madame Bosman told us
Did
Givenchy.
You hear it? I think we heard it pronounced Givenchy. Yeah.
Givenchy.
Yeah, right. ZH. Givenchy.
Yeah.
Next one I think is this is funny to look at all right, so it's Hermes. I say Hermes, but the phonetics says Hermes. Hermes. And I think that, frankly, that's probably the way to say it, but everybody says Hermes.
Hermes or Hermes.
Hermes, yeah.
Hermes. Yeah. Yeah. The next one is was in the news a lot. It's kind of the equivalent of the Amazon, right?
Yes.
In China, it's Huawei, Huawei. So Huawei.
So you're not putting the H there? Huawei?
No, I'd say Huawei.
Okay.
Huawei.
Yeah,
Huawei. Yeah.
I think with the H, because the phonetics for the listeners, it's HWAA-WAY. So I would say Huawei. But again, yeah.
Huawei.
Oh, here's another one. HUBLOT. Hublot. Hublot translates as porthole in French, which reflects the shape of the bezel of Hublot watches. I've been mispronouncing this for years.
Would you call Hublot?
Hublot. Yeah, Hublot or something. And now we know it's
Hublot.
Hublot.
Hublot. This one, I don't know if I'm going to say it right. The furniture brand that everybody knows, ubiquitous furniture brand, IKEA, I-K-E-A. But it looks like here it should be said IKEA.
Correct. This is the one that surprised me the most.
Surprised me too.
I looked at a couple other places, and apparently it's IKEA.
IKEA.
Yeah.
We all say IKEA. There's not a person. I even think commercial. I even think people that I know that have worked there say IKEA. Don't they?
Yes, and I wonder if they just decide to let that slide because it's such too hard to correct at this point.
What is it? Americanized or anglicized?
Anglophile.
So it's IKEA. Let's go to IKEA.
IKEA. Let's get some meatballs at IKEA and a cheap bookshelf. Next one is, I don't think I've ever mispronounced this. I don't think you have either, but it's Lancome, and it's literally LAHN/COHM or Lancome, and I think it looks like it sounds, frankly, that word. That was me, but.
Yeah, the other one I've said correctly too, and you have as well, Moet Chandon, which is
correct.
Moet Chandon, the the champagne, Moet Chandon.
Okay, next one is Nike. And I think we're all saying it right. Nike.
What else would you say?
Well, Nike.
Nikes.
Right?
Got a pair of Nikes.
I guess you could say Nikes, but they emphasize that K-E-Y part, the Nike, yeah.
Here's another one I've been saying wrong. The hazelnut spread, Nutella. I would say Nutella, or Nutella, but supposedly it's Nutella.
Nutella, yeah, Nutella. I always love the Nutella.
I think we say nut, right? Because it's nuts.
Nutella. And if you say, everybody knows what Nutella is. And I think I've heard people say Nutella as well.
Nutella.
I never forget this. One time, Tim and I had a house up, and we were doing a week trip to P-Town or something, and my nieces came up to visit, and Tim introduced them to a jar of Nutella and a bag of pretzel rods, and by the end of that visit, they were flying off the walls because the half the jar was gone and the bag of pretzels was gone. They would dip the pretzels in.
Yeah, and then of course everybody copied us. I mean, that's another thing we missed, John. We could have mixed the chocolate filled pretzels with Nutella or with peanut butter.
Yeah. All right, this next one is, I think, pretty simple. Porsche. I think people say Porsche because that's what they've heard, but it's Porsche. Have you ever?
I go back and forth. You know, Mahoney used to correct me. I say Porsche, and then this is Porsche.
Porsche, okay.
It's Porsche. This other one, I used to say tag wow, tag yow. I'm even tongue tied saying it. Tag.
I used to say tag hewer myself.
Hewer, yeah, that's what it was. I was trying to get it out. Tag hewer, but it's tag hewer, right? Tag hewer.
Tag Heuer. So it's TAH/G. So it's Tag Heuer.
Oh, Tag Heuer.
Yeah, Tag Heuer.
You know what? If your name is hard to pronounce, don't sell it.
I knew we were going to veer into you
Tag Heuer.
Just don't do it. Yeah.
I got two more I'm going to add after you do this next one.
And how funny that this particular list ends with a brand we know we worked with for over 9 years, Volkswagen. So it's a Volkswagen, but a correct pronunciation is Volkswagen.
Volkswagen.
Yeah, Volkswagen.
The other one that I added, well, then and then there was there's two I want to add and see if you know how to say them. But then there was one with actually in the UK they've done an ad on how to properly pronounce the car company Hyundai.
Hyundai.
Right, which I've heard people say Hyundai. The actual, I watched the commercial, and as far as I can say, or as far as I can hear, it's Hyundai. Hyundai.
Are you serious?
Yeah, well, Hyundai.
Okay, interesting. And what's your other one?
Like noon, Hyun. So the one that I always see in the store, and I always pronounced wrong, it was the name brand of yogurt, F-A-G-E.
Oh, Fage.
Phage.
I used to call Phage.
Phage yogurt. And the other one was the famous department store in Manhattan, Henri, first name, and then Bendl. And a lot of people would say Henri Bendel, but it's Henry Bendel.
It really is Henry Bendel. Okay.
Yeah, my grandfather worked for him.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he was born in the U.S. He was not French. but everybody would be Henri Bendel. It's Henry Bendel. And my father would say, because my father grew up in the Bendel property. It's the Bendel estate, which is in Stamford. And my grandfather was his driver and would drive him into Manhattan every day to the store. And so my father would talk about Bendel's. And I was like, isn't it? He goes, oh, they had a department store in Manhattan. I said, oh, Henri Bendel? He goes, no, it's Henry Bendel's. Henry Bendel, that was his name. And then people would call the store and they would say, Henry Bendel. Oh, he thought it was Henri Bendel. Anyway.
You know what? That's so typically American to take a name. And we were taught this in French class by Madame Bossman, and you French it up. Like
Yep,
Henri.
French it up.
I'll say
Henri Bendel. Well, I've heard it called that. You've heard it called that.
Yes, same here. Yeah.
So that's those were the names. The biggest surprise for me was IKEA.
IKEA.
And some of the other ones I didn't know. So, I didn't know some of these Swedish and German things. The other ones,
Adidas. Adidas is one of the big ones for me.
I don't like Adidas. I like Adidas. No. So, yeah. So anyway, we'll post that article to our Facebook page, which is Focus Group Radio. You'll find us on Facebook. And be sure to head over to focusgroupradio.com. You'll find all of our programming there, including our Tuesday podcast, which is TFG Unbuttoned. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, John, for your work and for you running the ship here. And thanks to our friends at Deep Discount. They have a Mr. and Mrs. sale going on right now. I had picked the talented Mr. Ripley. John had picked Mr. Skeffington. And the new release this week is Spoiler Alert. So be sure to, while you're at focusgroupradio.com, click on the Deep Discount logo and start shopping away. We hope you all have a great week. Remember to arrive alive. Don't text and drive. Arrive alive. I saw something today on one of the social media things. There was a woman driving, and I believe it was California, and she pulls up next to a Tesla, and the woman is sleeping. She's in her car, and the car's going.
Auto drive or something?
Yeah, well, they can drive themselves. The woman is
Supposedly,
out. Her head is down. She is sleeping, and the car's going along at 70 miles an hour. Would you trust it?
No way. No.
Maybe we have to get with technology.
Or maybe we have to realize that it's a moving vehicle that weighs a lot that could kill people, and we might as well have we might as well be paying attention.
There's no way I could do that. Right?
No,
Maybe someday. Maybe someday we'll. So hey, everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you next week with TFG Unbuttoned. Take care.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.